Thank you all for coming tonight. My name is Sandy Golding and I'm president of Beaches Watch. For those of you who are not familiar with our organization, we are a nonprofit, nonpartisan civic organization here at the beach. We've been in existence since 2004. Our focus is educating and engaging citizens in the issues that come before our elected officials. And we do that by having meetings like this every month. We do candidate forums and all kinds of other things. So we're glad to have you here tonight. And we have a really great speaker tonight, so we're looking forward to it. But before we get started, just wanted to make a few announcements. I hope you all picked up an agenda when you came in. On the back of the agenda is contact information for our local elected officials, so if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, you know how to get in touch with them. And speaking of elected officials, we don't have any electeds tonight, except we do have Mayor-elect Ellen Glasser for Atlantic Beach. Not officially in office, but Mayor-elect, yes. And then we also have City Manager George Forbes from Jacksonville Beach. Okay, so real quick, a few announcements. Our meetings are always videotaped, so you can actually see the meeting if somebody isn't here tonight and they would like to see or hear what was discussed tonight. They can go to our website or our Facebook page and see the meeting. Also, want to let everybody know that we are doing our early bird membership drive for 2018. So that started October 1st. If you renew your membership or actually get a new membership by the end of December, your name will be entered into a drawing to win a prize at our spring social. So get your memberships in. Eileen is over here at the table and she can take care of that. It's not a lot of money. It's just enough to help keep us continue doing what we're doing. And also want to let everybody know that at the end of the year, we always give a give-back donation to a worthy nonprofit in our community who is enriching the quality of life for our beaches residents. And we have nominations open now for that award or for that donation. So we would encourage you to think about a nonprofit that's here at the beach that's making a difference and submit the nomination. The information is included here on the agenda on how you would submit it. And then also just want to remind people that we're always looking for volunteers who can be involved with Beaches Watch. If you'd like to serve on our board of directors, we would love that. If you want to be involved with our programs committee that organizes meetings like this or our candidate forums, we're always welcoming new people. Also, our membership committee, if you'd like to help us grow our membership, we'd love to have you. And public relations and communications, if there's anybody that would like to help us with that, just let us know. And then our November meeting is going to be Wednesday, November 1st. It'll be here. We are working on trying to get some speakers to talk about the state of our dunes after Hurricane Irma. We're in the process of trying to get that organized, so it's tentative right now, so I'm just letting you know. Hopefully we can make that happen, but that would be Wednesday, November 1st at 7 o'clock. So do we have any other announcements real quickly before we move to our guest speaker? Okay, so tonight we are pleased to have the Executive Director of the St. Johns River Water Management District, Dr. Ann Shortell, and she has 25 years of experience with lake, riverine, and reservoir management for water quantity and quality. She previously served as the Executive Director for the Suwannee River Water Management District, and she's been the Executive Director for our St. Johns River Water Management District since 2015. So I'd like to introduce Dr. Ann Shortell.
Coming out. We've had a very interesting few weeks, so you never know. There are a few of our communities where I think there might have been a lot of empty chairs where people are still dealing with the sort of this late evolving flooding that we're experiencing from the first nor'easter, followed by the hurricane, followed by the next nor'easter, and whatever's going on now. And if you've been watching the news, something's coming up in the Gulf now. So I'm not sure if that one has a name yet, but we're not rooting for it to be here, just saying. So for those of you who are unfamiliar with a state's water management districts, there are 5 of them. Our district is all or part of 18 counties from the Georgia line all the way down to Vero Beach, essentially. And then so it encompasses the entire watershed of the St. Johns River, all of its tributaries, about 2/3 of the Indian River Lagoon, and then a whole bunch of other things that are more or less connected a little bit further central to the state, like Lake Apopka, and then the Harris Chain of Lakes up to the Ocklawaha River, which is one of the main tributaries to the St. Johns River. I don't know if this got said, but I'm not uncomfortable with, if we're talking about a particular topic, I'm going to kind of give you several vignettes of topics. But if I'm on a particular topic and you have questions, don't hesitate to see if I can answer them. It could be Stump the Scientist night, I don't know. I've only been in this district a little over 2 years, but I do have a couple of longer time employees here with me tonight, and they might know answers, or we would certainly get back to you with answers. Teresa Monson is here, and Jeff Sample is in the back. Many of you know both of them. So we have 4 main offices. One is in Jacksonville, not that far from here. One in Palatka, that's headquarters. One in Maitland, so in the general greater Orlando area, and then one in Palm Bay, which is our southernmost service center. So a service center is a place where the general public can come, get information, find out, if you couldn't get the answer on our website, find out, hey, you just had a hurricane, but is my favorite trail open? You can call in, go to the website, and find this kind of information out, or you certainly can come to our offices. We also have little outposts that are either small laboratories or field stations, and that's where a lot of our land managers are, and also many of our field scientists, the ones who are going out day in and day out, collecting the data that help us, all of us, make informed decisions about how we're managing our waterways. So we'll back up right now and kind of wind back a few weeks, and let's talk about what we all just went through. In terms of water, it was pretty interesting. Somebody asked me, well, when was the last time you were out here on the beaches? And I had to admit, the last time I was out here was right after Hurricane Matthew. We brought pumps out. We tried to help our local partners, our local governments with the flooding that was occurring here in the beach areas. So I'm sorry to say I haven't made it back out here until tonight. And I am very happy to say that it's really not the hurricane that brought me here tonight, which is great. But backing up even further than the hurricane, how many of you knew that our governing board declared a water shortage warning this winter? It got raise your hand if you knew that. Awesome. Okay, so we've got an informed audience. Okay, I've got to be very careful now because Stump the Scientist is becoming much more likely. So a water shortage warning is how water management districts, by statute, deal with droughts. When if something catastrophic happened to a water supply, like a breaking of a reservoir and the water supply was drained out. It is a regulatory mechanism to get all of our water users, whether you're a residential user, whether you're industrial, whether you're agriculture, to curtail, to pull back on the amount of water you're using, because in a drought, if you think about it, we never know when it's going to be over. So when we're asking people to curtail their use as much as they can, we start kind of just informationally and then ramp up at it as it becomes more acute. But this is very important because we don't know when the rains will come back. And ultimately, our water supply, regardless of where you get the water from, it's coming from the rainfall to begin with. I was very interested to see that we declared, or our governing board declared, a water shortage warning, which is the ringing of the bell, sounding the alarm, saying, please, everyone, conserve water. And what happened to water use during that time? It went up. So in 2016, quite a dry year, so the reserves, most of our water comes from the aquifer, comes from beneath our feet, not all of it, but a lot of it. And so the water is going down, 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 because it was a very dry year. This is what happens around here, right? I mean, have you ever lived here and been in an average year where everybody said, wow, this is really average? Everybody is always either, my gosh, I've never seen it this dry, or now, where is all this water coming from? Help us get rid of this water. It's, you know, we're underwater, essentially. So it's never average. And there's kind of a truth to that. It's not average very much. Our water from the sky comes in very big, inconvenient aliquots, like gully washers, right? A lot of water really fast, and then we've gotten very good at ditching and draining and moving that water right off the landscape, which is great when you need that to happen, but not at all great if you need the aquifer, which is where our water supply mostly comes from, to be replenished. So 2016 was a dry year. Not a historic drought or anything, but more droughty than normal. And in November of last year, all right, that was the driest month of the year, and we got less than 0.2 of an inch of rain over the entire district for the entire month. So that's the cumulative. That equates to something just over 40 million gallons of water. That's not a good thing, right? That's very, very dry. And when you really do the math, so the scientists and the engineers where I work, we do math all the time. And we find that in a month like that, even though it's a cooler month, so it's not evaporating, what little rain we got is not immediately evaporating, but it was deficit, what I would think of as deficit spending. We were using more water than was falling out of the sky and getting back into the aquifer. Okay? Now contrast, that was whole month. That was all we got. Contrast that with the 5 days in this area. I'm calling it 5 days because we had the nor'easter preceding the hurricane. So for the 5 days that constituted the nor'easter and Hurricane Irma, the entire district had, on average, more than 10 inches of rain, 10.24 inches of rain, and this county and all of the surrounding counties up here had more than that. That, in 5 days, is 2.2 trillion gallons of water. Now, remember back to November, just a few months ago, right after, not that long after Matthew. So that month, remember what I said, a little over 40 million gallons for that month? 3 weeks ago, 5 days, 2.2 trillion gallons. Yes, ma'am?
How much of that ends up in the aquifer?
That's an awesome question. Think about it like this. On an annual basis, this district, so everybody that lives here, about 5 million people or so, we consumptively use, so we use water, you know, not only at our homes, but in our offices, in industry, and in agriculture, all the different water uses. We use a little over 1 billion gallons a day. You know, when you're talking about water use. Sounds like a gigantic number, right? That sounds huge. That's all of us over 18 counties. Most of that is coming out of the aquifer. How much is getting back? And so, I'm getting to your question, I promise. Back to the 2.2 trillion gallons. That would, if I had this giant bowl, or a big carboy, for those of you who are scientists, some big vessel to put all that water in, we would be able to satisfy the consumptive use of all our water users for about 5 years for the entire district. 5 days. But, your question, what happened to that water?
We lose it.
You lose it. Billions and billions and billions of gallons of water went straight out the mouth of the St. Johns River, even though that was being held back in a pretty epic way because of the winds, right? So that climate-wise, it wasn't rushing out as fast as it might have, but the volumes were huge. We opened up gates and put water also to the Indian River Lagoon, untreated stormwater. We don't like to do that. We like to help ourselves and our partners treat our stormwater so that it's clean when it leaves the wetlands and leaves the properties or stays in the wetlands and recharges the aquifer. But what has Florida done? Well, Florida has been very, very efficient at ditching and draining and paving. I will say, I mean, this is a beautiful community, but driving in, I'm thinking, wow, this is a tremendous amount of impervious surface. No aquifer recharge is occurring through the pavements, through our sidewalks, on our rooftops, all those things. So, in the old days, when people were trying to sell swampland, that water was on our landscapes and infiltrating in a way that was much calmer, even though there were still big storms. But much more of the water stayed on the landscape. Well, now, with 20 million people plus here, that water is deliberately, from a century ago, asked to depart much more quickly. So it goes to tide. A lot of it goes to tide. A lot recharges the aquifer. About a week and a half ago, I was looking at the data and realized that our aquifer, which really had been stressed, low levels, had come up to what we think of as the 80th percentile. So pretty full. If you think of a pitcher, right? If you're 80% full, that's pretty full. That's pretty good. And it's even better now because a little more time has passed, and it takes time is part of that equation. Time it takes to get the water into the aquifer. But I would put it to you that one of the things we've got to think about differently than we have in the last 50 years is that fresh water, even if it's been flowing across the ground and might have, it's stormwater, it's picked up, bugs or something. It may be not the most pristine water at that moment in time, but it is fresh. It can be cleaned, and then it's potable for us again. Much, much more difficult, and don't miss this point, much more costly to pull it out of the ocean and take all the salt out of it. Very, very expensive. So the same folks that are, concerned about our water supply, and we all should be, are also looking at their water bills and saying, holy cow, what the heck, right? I mean, we all have home budgets, and we have to be mindful of these things. So I'd like to encourage all of us to be encouraging everybody who can to conserve water Remember I said 2016 water use in this area generally, this county generally, went up from the prior 3, 4, 5 years. Even though the population has been increasing, it's been pretty flat. Well, remember, the economy was down. So one thing you can control at your house is your water bill, your electric bill, things like that. So people were being cautious and conserving water and everything else. Good. The economy comes back. People are like, hey, let's go. And it's a little bit of a dry year, so they're irrigating. Water use went up a little bit, and then we declared a water shortage because it was drought, and water use went up again. That signal is hard to decipher. It's hard to figure out. I mean, our agricultural producers and ranchers and whatnot, they are producing our food. They can't conserve in the same way you and I might. Should we water our yards, or should we say to the farmers, water your crop? Right? So we're not all going to conserve equally under a drought situation, but I will tell you, those water uses went up. Not so much right now. If you are watering your yard right now, you need to go out and turn off your system, because I think people just forget we've got these nifty yard waterers, and we just walk away from them, and we're watering it at times when we don't need to be. So that's part of the equation, right? So it's important. Did you
How
have a
far
question?
down is the aquifer, and is it like under the St. John's? Is it?
So sure, that's a great question. So most of our drinking water comes from what we call the upper. So are there any geologists in the room? Because you guys are, they will all be shuddering at my description. But so picture it like this. It's not like an underground river. It is rock formations that are really good and porous, and so they hold a lot of water. Sometimes the porosity is bigger than other places. When you get near springs, the tunnels in those rocks are big enough that divers can find their way. But for most places, it's more like a sponge, except it's rock. So you can't.
Limestone.
Yes. So right, and it has little holes in it, but it fills up with water. So in the Upper Floridan is in this area is quite a bit deeper than it is in Suwannee, where I moved from that district to here. So we're talking about the Suwannee River, the Santa Fe, a lot of the big Ichetucknee State Park, that beautiful spring. The aquifer is essentially right at the surface, right? Because that water is pouring out of those springs. Most places like here, that Upper Floridan has pitched down. There's a big, thick clay layer, and the water has to work its way down through the surface and down, 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 and it gets cleaner as it goes, which is great. So the answer is it's variable. But our very smart geologists have it mapped, so we know where that is. Now, when I say Upper Floridan, that kind of implies that there's a Lower Floridan.
I came from the Lower Florida. Lake Okeechobee seemed to be the one we were concerned with the levels.
Yes,
And I think our water came from there.
so Lake Okeechobee is, let me be very clear about this, since you probably read the papers in the not so distant past when the lower part of the Indian River Lagoon experienced some pretty extreme algal blooms. Water coming out of Lake Okeechobee goes east and west, and that's the South Florida Water Management District. But we have the same challenges here. St. John's River experiences algal blooms from time to time. Beautiful blue lakes in Maine and in Canada also experience algal blooms. What are algae? It's a plant. Essentially, it's very tiny, single or multi-celled plant. And how do we get our grass to grow? We put nitrogen and phosphorus on it. We put nutrients on it. And what does our grass do? It grows. So if that washes into our rivers, the algae grows too. And because there's so many of us here, I mean, nutrients are coming from us. Let's not forget that we are producing waste that have to be taken care of. The dogs that we're walking, right? Our septic systems, that's back to the human waste. The stuff we're putting on our yards, what the producers, the agricultural producers are putting on their crops to make those grow. Anything that doesn't actually get taken up and used on the land is very likely to find its way to the waterways. And this is a global phenomenon.
The warmth of the heat and the temperature of the water helps that grow too.
So, do plants grow faster in Canada or here?
I'm here.
Okay, and so again, temperature is a point on that as well. The temperature rises, things grow, we have a longer growing season, it all, kind of comes together. So we have the big gulps of water and then droughts, and then we have the challenges of water quality. And it's not just nutrients, but that's one that we all can work on together because we're all part of it. Anybody who says, well, my septic tank is fine because it works, doesn't understand that it was never designed to remove nutrients. Never. A working septic system is designed to remove the, bacteria and that kind of stuff. And it does work for that, but not too well on nutrients. So those two things, water supply and water quality, are 4 of our core missions at any of the water management districts. So these are things that we focus on: water supply, water quality, and the other 2 pieces of our core mission are flood prevention. We were great at that just a few weeks ago, right? We were great. So we only have a few tools in the toolbox for flooding, right? We do have structures that we can open and close, and I was telling you about those a little bit. We have no water control structures on the St. Johns River. So when someone's flooding on the St. Johns River and they call us, we are sympathetic, but that is not what we can do. We permit how people build things, and we ensure that they are properly engineered to take care of stormwater. That has a very strong flood control or flood prevention piece to it, and also it's very good for water quality, so it has a dual role. But when we're talking about how we permit, a new housing development, say, or a new hotel, those stormwater systems are designed for certain sizes of storms. And if the storm is bigger than that, water is going to leave that system and go down to the next system, and eventually it's in the natural waterways again, and so the story goes. Hurricane Irma was many times larger than any stormwater system is designed to handle in the state or in anywhere. You don't design for gigantic storms because it's not feasible. Yes, ma'am.
But with the warming up of the oceans and everything, are we going to be likely to get more and more of these strong storms?
So there's the strength of storms, there's frequency of storms, and then there's just how are they going to be bigger? And I'm a limnologist, which is surface waters, lakes, rivers, and so forth, and I pretend to know something about the aquifer. I don't know, I know what the climatologists tell us about climate change. I can 100% show you the data for sea level rise, which in this area you've got to be paying attention to. I think that there's less certainty about what we're going to see in terms of variability in storms. You know, we feel like we just had a huge one, and we did. Do we have a pattern? I don't know, but I don't think we should take our eye off of the skies.
Well, we really had two in 1 year. Matthew was in October of last year.
Right. So but that was, I hate to say it, that was kind of an average hurricane. But I'm not poo-pooing what you're saying. This is part of the hypotheses about climate change that's uncertain. I don't know how we would design for it, but we certainly, and in communities that are coastal, we have got to pay attention to sea level rise. So you get more with a landfalling hurricane or just a bad storm. You get more water coming up higher. You get, full moon, kind of that clear blue sky tides, the king tides that are higher. You can begin to plan and design around some of those things, and we work with our cooperators to do just that, because certain areas are easier to protect than others. Certain places might be appropriate if you've got so let's say a wastewater treatment plant. You can armor that in a way that would protect you for many years. In other places, beautiful coastal restorations with wetland plants and mangroves and things like that, which everybody would think is beautiful and appreciate, also help to protect the coastline when the storms come. There's very good evidence already from South Florida that the Everglades really protected some of the communities from more intense damage because of that shoreline natural system. So it is a concern. Another concern that people don't necessarily talk about, everybody's rightly concerned about the water rising. Think about something else. We're talking about porous rock for the aquifer, right? And we are pulling our drinking water, which is pretty, you hardly need to treat it in most places because it's fresh and it's clean. But what is the water like at the coast in the aquifer?
Salt water.
It's salt water.
Right.
And it can be brackish, so it's kind of mixed, right, at the lower salt level. Well, as the oceans rise, you get not only this surface effect that we can see and feel, but you get infiltration of salt water beneath our feet in ways that then we're pulling up water that would spoil plants if we irrigated, or which would have to be treated, brackish water, drinking water treatment. It's costly. So there's, probably shouldn't say tip of the iceberg, that probably is not a good point right now, but you know what I mean. I mean, there's more to this when you start peeling back the ideas there. Did you have a question, Sam?
Yes, I have a question. When you start talking about the water supply, if you were to look north of us to the like Lake Delamere, up in that area, and the water comes down south of us, how does that affect us? How does that factor?
So that system right here, that system doesn't affect us.
Mhm.
It comes across to Atlanta and down through the basin to Apalachicola.
Okay.
And it's highly regulated by the Corps of Engineers. The state of Florida has been suing the state of Georgia, and intermittently Alabama gets in the mix as well. It's not as it doesn't specifically affect us here. However, if you think about the Suwannee River Basin, okay, so that is a beautiful. If you've never been to the Suwannee, you must go. It's just beautiful, and it's the mouth of the Suwannee goes out into the Gulf of Mexico. That river goes all the way up into Georgia, and the Okefenokee Swamp is some of the headwaters. 51% of the watershed for the Suwannee River is not in our state. So we really have to work with, so think about the politics of working with your sister cities, or working with the county, or working with the state of Florida. Now we've got an interstate collaboration that needs to occur. It can get dicey at times because water is life, and it's important to everybody.
While you're on that, can you explain to me
No.
the coalition that was created by Tallahassee? There was a 12-man coalition that monitored and made decisions with all the water management, 5 of them. Are you familiar with that?
I'm not.
Okay.
And I don't, how far back in time are you?
Oh, a year.
A
A
year?
year.
Well, I can assure you that if that were, I would have been
The
aware.
governor's office assigned 5 guys to form the coalition to go around and research all the different water management sections.
Must have been very covert.
Okay.
So,
So you're not familiar with the coalition?
at all.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Do you have any updates on what's happening with the Rodman Dam and how it might affect us?
So, it's been there a long time. It's very popular in certain quarters because it is very, when you pond up water, ponded water is really, really good in this state at growing bass. So there's a big bass there. It's would be unlikely that you could permit that kind of a construction in this day and age. You can build reservoirs, but they're typically, in today's standards, they would be what's called offline. In other words, you don't literally dam up the river. You build a reservoir to the side and take the high flows and put it off to the side. And Rodman is older school. So there's a water control structure there. It's managed by the state. There is a reservoir. It could be used for water supply. It's obviously frequently used for recreation. And it's in some places wildly popular, and in other places not so much. I do know that there's a lot of conversation about it at the federal, state, and local level. And eventually that will work itself out. There is a not-for-profit organization that in this fall timeframe, so now, is organizing, I think they're calling them listening sessions, but they're trying to get stakeholders around the table to begin to have a conversation that's less about finger pointing and more about solutions. So if that's of interest to you, you might be interested.
Is the Desiree Ranch in the St. John's?
I'm sorry, say that.
Is the Desiree Ranch in the St. John's?
So, Deseret is a property owner in our district and I think in others. Yes.
Are they
They're
going
not-
forward with the development?
I was going to say, is that a political development group?
So they are permitted water users, mostly agricultural, but a lot of our agricultural residents have plans for future development. That is mostly well south of here, and I don't know any of the details. We would permit a development, but we wouldn't be sort of taking sides, if you will. But there's lots of large landowners that are making decisions, businessmen, agriculturalists, entertainment industry, like, you know, the theme parks. There's lots of different things going on and all the time. And those things ideally are all happening in a public forum, so that if something's happening near you that you're concerned about, you should be able to weigh in on it.
But that one's not way over. I weighed in on that one and got nowhere. I mean, we hacked the Palaca office and got nowhere.
So we
St. John's management.
And is it the point they're going to take millions, hundreds of millions of gallons out of the river
Are
every
you
day?
talking about the development that's down in Osceola County?
It's over our watershed.
It's supposedly.
It's the
a
big
ranch.
cattle ranch owned by the Mormon
Isn't that
Church.
off 192?
So Deseret is down
It's 192
Fair-
east of Melbourne, isn't it?
quite
Between Melbourne and
quite
Kissimmee.
far south, and we had, so if they put out plans, people can comment on them, it sounds like you did, but that wouldn't be permitted by the Water Management District until they wanted to actually build something. And then we would be permitting those stormwater plans.
But there's a designated amount of water that they can draw out of the St. John's River for them. Now, they're not doing it.
It's not permitted.
Well, but it's designated. I mean, I don't know.
If it's not permitted, it's not permitted.
Is it not allowed to
You can't do it until you have a permit. So you have to have a permit. So we primarily do two kinds of permits. One is water use, which now I think is what you're talking about, and that might be from the aquifer, it might be from surface waters, you know, all different sorts of things. Reuse water, those sorts of things. And for most people, if you get a utility bill, you don't have a permit for that water that you're using, but your utility has a water use permit. So they're taking care of all of you under one permit. Agriculture, the water users have permits, or they're not allowed to withdraw the water. The other kind of permit we have is called an environmental resource permit, and those are the ones that we do for developments like platted communities, like a new hotel, things like that, to build a Walmart. People come in, they make an application, we figure out what they can and can't do, they have to mitigate maybe if they need to fill a corner of a wetland. We issue those kinds of permits too.
What if you have a permit for a system that has never been adequate? How do you go about it?
So we do have, we have a whole regulatory division that does all these permits, and one group in that organization is compliance. So sometimes things aren't built quite right, they didn't quite work, and usually a couple compliance visits from our engineers or scientists helps that developer or whatever it is get back into compliance. You're not supposed to be able to, you know, dump your water next door on somebody else's property, those sorts of things.
But there's also a question, for instance, in Atlantic Beach or in all the beaches, really, because we're barrier islands, that the permits have been given out, one by one, and it doesn't somehow cohere or make a workable system.
So typically in the cities and counties or in the regional councils, that's where the planning for development comes in. And we're permitting the very specifics of those systems as they come in to be permitted. Sometimes it seems kind of like a mishmash, unless you know what the
They were
master plan
grandfathered
is.
in, and then a new one, and this one, and that one, but they never really were designed to work together.
Sometimes that's true. Now, the stormwater systems, I mean, we take those things into account. But, I mean, you make a valid
But
point.
would it be behoove the city to go to the St. John's Water Management office to ask for streamlining these things?
I probably not really streamlining, but that planning aspect where things fit together better. I mean, if you look around we're better at it now, not perfect, but our society is better at it. If you look at more recent planned developments, they might work pretty well compared to something that was constructed in the 60s. In the 60s, we did not have the laws that required the permitting of these surface water, stormwater systems. So if you've got one of those older communities with untreated stormwater next to a shiny new development, those are not going to operate the same way. But we do have compliance folks that go out, try to help people get into compliance with their permit, because if they have a permit, it has a whole, and they go on for pages, and they have requirements that they must meet. We take citizen calls rather frequently, like daily, many times a day, folks who are concerned. Now, in the last 3 weeks, we've probably gotten hundreds, I don't know how many calls. A lot of those we have to tell people, this storm has overwhelmed everybody, right? And we all just have to kind of work together to get through it. But in those more normal times, somebody must be in compliance with their permit. And we start with trying to be helpful, and if we need to, we move on to enforcement, which is tougher. Yes, sir. Did you have a question?
Yeah, my wife mentioned the new developments
Yes.
downstate. One of the biggest water uses is in those homes is everybody's got to have a green lawn. Now, we should be able to restrict and tell everybody you don't have to have a green lawn to have a beautiful home. You can have a stone lawn. Now, I lived in St. Petersburg 40 years ago, and I went to the city and asked them if I could put in a stone lawn. They said, no, you're not going to do that. You're going to have a green lawn. Well, why don't we reverse that? You go to Arizona or New Mexico, the whole developments are all stone lawns. Nobody used any water, no landscaping, no trucks and trailers in the street all the time, no blowers blowing the grass into the road or going down the sewer and causing pollution. It eliminates a lot of those problems.
I don't think his water use went up when we declared a water shortage. I mean, sir, you raise a very good point. Think about California. So they have sort of pulled out a little bit of a critically water shortage. That drought is not really over, but it's lessened a little bit. And the governor, the state agencies had to act. They curtailed water use. We have those tools here. We typically don't have to leverage them because, remember, we get a lot of water. It's the management of the highs and lows that are more difficult. But out west, if you've visited California recently, that landscape has very deliberately and definitely changed of necessity. I think we're still in this state at the point where we're trying to encourage and cajole people in that direction. We're trying to incentivize water conservation, which a carrot is better than a stick, but sometimes maybe we need a stick, occasionally. But it's a difficult thing because people do value their property rights, their ability to have that green lawn, and peer pressure. Think about peer pressure. Yes, sir.
One thing that I'm concerned or would like to get some knowledge on is, this is an island, we have a mountain for where we got our water beneath us. And we've been exhibiting now a few wells that have salt truth. And while you're in a stretcher, you can go to another aquifer. They're not connected. per se, yes. Now, when are we going to run out of those aquifers, one, but secondly, if we have that well, just say, let it idle, will that salt intrusion well, does that have the ability through Mother Nature to heal itself to stop the salt intrusion, or that may be used 10 years from now, whatever?
So that's an excellent question. When you have a well field that's exhibiting some stress on some of its wells, changing the strategy of how you use them, resting wells, can be very helpful. When I was at Swanee, I'd been there only a few days, and I get a call from Cedar Key, beautiful, beautiful island community, and they had lost their water supply. It was too salty. And so that was a crisis, went back in the drought. We brought in water, we drilled new wells, we worked on that. We got them a temporary RO, which is a reverse osmosis, a chemical way of getting the salt out of their water supply. And the wells that had been intruded with salt water were rested, and they did come back. But that is not uniformly the case. So it's easier to keep them protected real time than to let them get salty and try to bring them back. The bringing them back is generally more difficult.
Now, how would you go about protecting that? Reducing consumption out of that well, or?
Diversify, rest, that whole pattern thing that we're talking about. We've got water all around us. We need to get more of it clean and in the aquifer, because that's built storage, but we can build other storage. Remember what I told you, 5 days of rain, 2.2 trillion gallons of water. If I had a place to put all of that, it would have been enough water for all the things we do, not just residential, everybody, for about 5 years. So it's how we deal with that. And part of that is absolutely what you're asking about. How do we get water, along our coastline to hold off the saltwater intrusion? And they're doing it on the West Coast. We have been fortunate on the East Coast. We've not had the same level of challenges with saltwater intrusion. It's not zero, but it's been less than on the West Coast. If you look at, and by West Coast I mean the Gulf Coast of Florida, over there you'll find many more wells where they're not taking the water out so much as they're putting the water in and forming a barrier against the salt water.
So there is a way to do that.
Absolutely, and you'll see more of that here.
Is this information available to our municipalities that could possibly advise them to try to be more, how to prevent?
Absolutely. So that utility would probably, or the public works folks, would be the ones to come in and talk to our water supply planners, and they would be very helpful in that. Yes, ma'am.
So to follow up with that, to build up the water supply, if I understand this correctly, and to hold off on the saltwater intrusion in coastal communities, do you guys offer recommendations on the percentage of impervious surface type building that would
Like Houston, to stop construction and covering over the.
So, I'm sorry.
the recommendations on what's too much, like 50/50 for residential?
So I don't know if we've got any rules of thumb like that. That would be handy.
Countywide or
Yeah.
citywide. I
There
mean,
might
So
be cities
the-
that are wrestling with this.
In this-
like Houston, that's what they said.
So like in the cities and the counties, those sorts of things would be by ordinance. So, but for us, let's say a developer comes in and he wants to build 100 houses. And he's got his plan, and we look at it, and it's got a huge amount of impervious surface. He has to deal with all that stormwater. And he's going to have to engineer that, and it can be very costly. So we wouldn't say necessarily, unless it's just physically impossible for him to do it, then we would deny the permit. But more likely, he's gonna be working with us, and we're like, hey, you gotta build this gigantic pond and all this conveyance to deal with that impervious surface. He might end up with a permit that's for 76 houses. And he's saved more wetlands, and he's got more green space, and he's got more places. So it's more of a, under our rules, it's more of, you know, what will fit on the landscape that you're trying to develop. In a city or a county, it's more by ordinance. And
I understand, what I'm asking is, are there recommendations that we should be pulling back on those?
I don't know, but I will find out, and we'll get that.
Well, let's remember, the beaches are built-out communities, so it really doesn't matter now. It's not going to have negligible or zero effect, a change now, because we're all pretty well built-out communities. The second thing is, when we talk about Houston built over the marsh property.
They did.
That's the problem there. It's a totally different problem with the beaches. They had marshland. It's more like New Orleans. They had marshes hold the water. When it rains a lot, it absorbs the water, so it stops flooding or mitigates it tremendously. They took those lowlands and they built over them, and that's why they have the flooding problem they have today. We have a different type of flooding problem here at the beaches, and it's negligible compared to what they had.
And you say we're built out? There's no more space to build?
I'm saying basically, yes, we're built out community. There's some lots here and there, but basically we're built out community.
But you could, so you could redevelop an area here, and you could change the amount of impervious by different engineered methods, things that actually do allow for infiltration of water, or that change that ratio. So, you know, eventually, the older homes, those areas may be redeveloped. Some of them may be old enough that they never had stormwater treatment. But in the redevelopment, I think what you're asking about could be possible and would include, in this day and age, stormwater treatment. I think so.
Well, we do it all the time in Jackson Beach. We're rebuilding older neighborhoods, but you can't wave a magic wand and say, oh, you're going to rebuild this neighborhood.
No, you're right about
especially
that.
In the state of Florida, especially in the state of Florida, that's not going. It's very unlikely that's going to happen, because it's all different property owners, and to get all the different property owners to have a new development and to wipe out all of the existing money they have in their homes for new ones is a very tough road to hoe, and is not a practical solution.
And
what
they
we're
took
doing
my
throughout
wand away,
For the
so-
last 30 years in Jackson Beach, we've been taking these areas that were built without any stormwater, without any treatment. You know, we've been spending a fortune, rebuilding stormwater systems in those areas.
And
and providing
retrofitting
the
is
treatment.
very expensive.
But as you said, the problem is that, even the stormwater systems are built for about a 15-year storm, not a 100-year storm, because that's the best you can do when you have a built-out area.
Oh, holy cow. Yes.
On the topic of building on wetlands, do you have any information about the subdivision that's trying to be built on the Guana River?
Where?
The Guana River, down in Long Beach?
In the neck, it's on the neck in St. John's County.
I don't, but if they're in for a permit with us, I can get it for you.
Yes, ma'am.
You can get their application.
And I know that they're trying to build on 76 acres of Guana. It's and there's a movement that's now gaining pretty good following. It's trying to say we want to implement that because it would be moving 76 acres of wildlife, trying to disperse that throughout lawn.
Yes, sir.
Oh, man, I'm curious about just understanding the saltwater intrusion. So let's just assume that Florida's sitting here with nothing built on it, and it's got these aquifers with fresh water, and then there's salt water in the ocean. If the sea level rises, does the existing reservoir of fresh water that's in the aquifer basically act as a barrier? In other words, there's no place for that seawater to go, and it somehow doesn't have the ability to come in and displace the fresh water? Does it kind of work that way?
It kind of works, very simplistically, kind of like a bubble.
Okay, so when it draws down, that's what creates the
So
ability for the
so
salt water to come
when
in.
the pressure, so there's pressures involved and there's chemistry involved, densities, and so forth.
Right, that's what I was saying.
So if the pressure is increasing from the coast, either laterally or underneath, that causes that bubble. You know, bubbles they move. So yeah, so the more water, fresh water that's going into the aquifer helps to keep that pressure against that intrusion.
Okay, so it's the drawing down of the aquifer that creates the opportunity for the salt water to
In part.
come in.
In part.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I would like to make a comment on this subject. I got two big projects here in Jacksonville in regards to the river. One of them is do not dredge the St. Johns River. And my plan is we're going to do better business-wise than we do if we dredge it and have to worry about all the banks caving in and the damage that it's going to do for many, many years in the future. But the other is, when it comes to the St. Johns River, why don't we dam the St. Johns River just south of Jacksonville, where it now is in to go into the city? Now, that will create a lot of things and prevent, one thing is saltwater intrusion. No more saltwater. We're going to dam it, put locks in it. Now, Clinton and my wife and I went to Europe last year. We took a river cruise down the Rhine. Almost every day we're going through locks. And those locks are hundreds of years old. Those people knew how to do it back years ago. We could do the same thing. Now, the river level would stay the same as it is now. And we will control it by opening up valves coming through the dam. Okay? In those tubes and pipes going through that, we're going to put water turbines, driving generators. Now, you say we lose 2.2 trillion gallons of water. Now that runs out and it goes out to the ocean and we get nothing for it. If we build a dam, that's going to generate enough power to light half of Jacksonville. So that's one thing with the power. Okay, we're going to gain the power as the river's going north. We're going to stop the intrusion.
So out west, that's very common. That's what most of the inline dams were built for hydroelectric generation.
In the 1930s.
Yeah, I didn't say you could do it today. I think I
I'm
said
very
all
familiar
mine.
with it.
Employment went up.
You're right about the hydropower.
We just say, on the news today, they said it's very dirty in the St. John's, and then my husband said it has to be dirty because that's just the essence of it. Is there any way to clean it?
So it will be cleaning itself, right?
That's what he said.
I mean, it's going to take some time. There were a lot of sewer overflows. I mean, it's not a really great time to be out in the water because hidden, logs and goodness, who knows. But if the water's moving, it will clean itself. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Ann Shortell. We really appreciate you being here tonight.
Thank you.
And please join me in thanking her as well. And I just want to mention very quickly something that I neglected and you didn't bring it up. And that is that there is going to be a beach cleanup.
21st.
Yep, October 21st. And Kevin is involved with that, I believe,
Clean
right?
Jacksonville.
Okay. All right, Clean Jacksonville, and Kevin's going to be involved as well. So we're going to be sending out an email if anybody's interested. We'll need volunteers to man the different street ends where the cleanup captains are going to be. And so they're going to be at Seagate, Beach Boulevard, 16th Avenue South, and Atlantic Boulevard. And I'll be sending out an email, so put that on your calendar because now that Irma's out.
Well, the international, the Ocean Conservancy does one internationally, and it got canceled because
of Irma, right?
So we're it's just another day.
Okay. All right, and just to remind everybody, November 1st will be our next meeting. And I want to thank you all for coming tonight. And again, thank you, Dr. Shortell.